Welcome to the Hair Metal Rules Podcast, where we celebrate all things 80s hair and glam rock. Join us as we dive into the world of spandex, big hair, and killer guitar solos with your host, Big J. From iconic bands like Motley Crue and Def Leppard to the lesser-known gems of the era like Lillian Axe and Babylon AD, we cover them all. So grab your hairspray and leather pants because it's time to rock out with the Hair Metal Rules Podcast. Hi folks, welcome back to the show. I have another special guest on the podcast today. This gentleman has been on the music scene for many years, the frontman for many acts, most notably Accept and Bangalore Choir. Listeners, please join me in welcoming David Reece to the show today. Hi Mr. Reece and welcome to the Hair Metal Rules Podcast.
Well, hello, Jeremy. Thanks for having me, man. My pleasure.
What started your interest in music and wanting to be a performer?
Oh, God, that goes back to as a young Okie. I grew up kind of in the country with staying at my granny's all the time. And you remember those old television turntable 8-track machines we had? You could do all three. She was playing Conway and Loretta and George Jones all day long. And she'd just sing to me. And I couldn't wait every day to hear her songs that she'd play, and Charlie Pride and all that, and I kind of, country was my thing as a kid. And then as I aged, we were sent up to Minnesota because my daddy worked for Phillips Petroleum, and he was a chemist there, and they had a big layoff in like '69. So we had to go look for work. And he ended up in Minnesota and said, come on up for 3M. So I started grade school there and wanted to be in the choir. And back in those days, man, I don't know if you remember, man, but if a boy was in choir, they thought you were a sissy.
Yes, I've been in choirs. My mom, I was raised in church, and you sung in the choir, and I did that all my life. So
I love
I
it.
know what you mean. Oh yeah.
But I took some ass beatings because of it. Those Yankees, they didn't think it was too cool for a boy to be in the choir, especially in those days. I kind of had a high tenor voice, because I hadn't changed. My voice hadn't changed. So the vocal teacher or the choir director took a liking to me, because I had pitch. And one day she said, we're going to do our big presentation. I think it was like 5th grade. And I want you to sing Yesterday with me. And she played a classical guitar. So we played for about 250 students, and the place went crazy. And that feeling, I'll never forget. That was my first live solo thing, I guess. And what happened was, after I'd walked out of that school, I got chased by the goons and got a pretty good whooping, just out of that basic young man jealousy thing, because everybody was saying great job and all that. And so I decided I wasn't going to do it anymore because I got tired of it. And she came over to my house. Her name was Mrs. Harnick. I remember her face, everything, beautiful woman. And she sat down with my mother and said, that kid has a gift. He needs to use it. And she said, well, he ain't coming back. He's hiding right now in the shed. And I didn't go back, and I regret it. But onward into your teens, I moved out of home, and I'll try to make this quick without boring you too bad, Jeremy.
Go ahead.
We moved into an apartment with like a group of us dudes that kind of hung out together. And one of the guys was a little older than us. We were all breaking our backs in factories and building houses. And we'd come home and he'd be sprawled out on the floor with a Stratocaster and a bunch of girls sitting around, drooling over him. And he played in top 40 bands. And we all kind of hated him because he just seemed like he didn't have to do nothing but, play guitar. And I remember one day I was in the shower. I'd gotten home from work and I was singing the old AM radios we could put in the shower on the soap dish. You could play it. Yes. And I was singing a Zeppelin song, and that shower curtain threw open. He said, man, you can sing. You want to join my band? And I said, sure.
Right.
So we started playing beer parties, and that's just how it started. And then I slowly moved my way up in the Midwest and kind of got a name for myself and joined a group called Dare Force. They were
Yes.
like the biggest band out of Minneapolis. And I mean, we were doing 200, 300 shows a year, 5 hours a day. I mean, we nonstop playing the honky tonks, you name it, we've been there.
You just play around the Midwest, that area?
We Canada, we'd sometimes go a little further south into Texas and, places like that, but Oklahoma and, but pretty much, the 5 state, the Midwest grind, you do South to North Dakota and then Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. And then you go up north to Canada from one side to the other. Then you go back to the Midwest and do that 5 state. Then you go back to Canada. It just never ends. And I swear to God, after a year of it, I was so sick of it, I couldn't take it anymore. But these days, the way things are since COVID, I'd cut one off just to go back to that feeling and that experience because I truly miss that road grind.
Yeah, I talked to Tommy Paris from Brittany Fox last night, and he said, even now he would rather be on a restricted schedule to know you had to play 5 nights a week, you had a day off, as opposed to you got to fly here and meet the rest of the guys and hang around this area for a little bit to get a gig. He's like, I'd much rather be on a bus where I knew when I got on the bus I was going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When I woke up that morning, that's where I'd be. And you set up, and then you left and you went to Beaumont, Texas, or whatever. He said the same thing you just said. He missed doing that regimented tour thing.
No, at the time, if you were making $150 a week, you were doing all right, and I wanted much more, and I knew the band was that good that we need to go to LA, and this would be around 81, but the guys they're kind of the big fish in a small pond mentality. We're going to get signed here. This Prince had come out of Minneapolis, and we kind of knew. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. You froze up a second. Go ahead. I got you. That's fine.
Okay. And, but the band refused to do it. So I just said, well, screw you guys. I'm going. And I was living out of cars and starving to death. I mean, everybody out there is a lead singer, and
right.
I had met up with an English guy and they had terminated one of their guitar players in Air Force. And I'd called back home and they said, come back. And I said, well, I got this guitar player. And they said, well, that's interesting because Brian's gone and we need another guitar. So I went back up with an English guy and we proceeded to play a lot of opening slots again, the grind and, the Cheap Trick dates and the Aerosmith dates and all that stuff. But we never really, crossed that, what's the Rubicon, that thing,
right.
To get out of there. But plus, we were still an overrated cover band, really. We did it really well, but songwriting wise, we were kids. We didn't know what we were doing. What we should have done is all gone to LA, gotten a record deal, had a real producer tear us apart and build a record. I think we could have done fabulous things, but some things just ain't meant to be.
Well, what was it like? My fascination that this genre of music is something I started listening to when I was about 16, back in about 86. I love this music. I love everything about it, and the Sunset Strip fascinates because all I've really ever seen about it is like Decline of Western Civilization, that movie. You see the bands on the stage, and you got to go pass out flyers and you got to try to get tickets and get people to come see. But that whole scene just fascinates me, and I would love to go back in time and just walk the Sunset Strip one time just to experience. I've said it on my podcast before, go to the Whiskey a Go-Go and see these bands that are they're not signed yet, but then they turn into something big, or go to Grizzari's. Was that the name of it? There
was like 3 blocks. There was the Whiskey, the Roxy, the Rainbow, Grizzari's, and then you went down Doheny Boulevard and you took a left, and there was the Troubadour, and then you had Orange County, of course. It was an hour or so away. You could go down there and play. But in California, you mentioned selling tickets and passing out flyers, and on every corner there's 10 bands trying to get noticed, and they got their hair 10 feet high, and they're little boots, and everybody. I actually saw Motley Crue's first Whiskey show. I was bored when I was playing with that English guy. Actually, we just riding around. We had an old Cadillac convertible. We were running up and down the strip, and we saw these big pictures of this crazy looking band called Motley Crue tonight, and it was Valentine's Day. And I said, let's go in there. And they said, okay. So we went in there, and it was mind blowing. I knew something was up. I could tell they had something. I mean, Nikki Sixx lit his legs on fire with lighter fluid. They came out with balloons. I mean, the place was packed. And funny thing about that story was I was in a hotel room with Tommy Lee one night talking about music. And I said, I saw you at the Whiskey on Valentine's Day with a band called A La Carte open for you. And he literally body slammed me to the bed and said, dude, that was our first Whiskey gig we ever played. I said, I was there. And he was a superstar at the time when I'd seen him again. I mean, I think it was the Theater of the Pain tour. And we were doing our nefarious things that we did in the 80s, of course, in the room all night. But I was kind of shocked. I said, that was your first gig? He goes, yeah, I know we played a few parties and stuff. And we lived right behind the Whiskey up on the hill where the movie is. They had this apartment. I forgot what they called it, but it'd be like they'd walk off stage and they'd take every human being to that apartment, and it would be like a war zone. I mean, those were nutty times. But I knew a guy named Herbert Worthington that my story goes into Bangalore Choir after Accept, and I went back to the Strip, and Herbert Worthington was living with Stevie Nicks, and he was Jimi Hendrix's personal photographer. And he would tell stories of the Sunset Strip of the 60s, you know, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, Janis Joplin, and the Whiskey being the place. And they basically shut down Sunset Boulevard because they'd bus in hippies and crazy people. He said there'd be nothing to see naked women running around slapping the hood of your car, you know, just the summer of love, you know. He said it was insane. He goes, it's nothing now compared to what it was 20 years ago.
Another generation and a whole lot tamer, just a different situation.
Yeah, there's a lot more dangerous drugs in the Strip when I was there and things like that. That was a big part of the culture. And the glam scene was never my scene. You know, I never was into that, but you'd see some, I mean, I saw Poisons play and before they were signed and those bands. I saw Rat when they were called Mickey Rat. They had Jakey Lee in the band, you know, they had Robin on guitar as well, but different band. You know, I think Juan Croucier, the bassist, was in Dokken in those days.
Right.
I mean, everybody kind of went around to each other's bands, you know, but the monsters, the heavyweights were Van Halen and Quiet Riot. That was a little before my time.
Bangalore Choir CDs.
Thank you.
And I love Angel in Black. That's a great song. Freight Train Running. Some of that band was pieces of Hurricane Alice, correct?
Yeah. Jackie Ramos and I played together in Milwaukee, the drummer. Originally, we had another guy on drums on that who played on that record and a different bass player. But we had the same management, which goes back to the Stevie Nicks story because that manager was her personal assistant. So after Accept, you know, I said, I'm going back to LA. I got a name now. I won't be living in people's cars looking for an unlocked car to sleep. You know what I mean? I'm hanging out at Stevie's house, and so was Hurricane Alice. And I knew those guys because they were from Minnesota and Milwaukee, and there was kind of a corporate thing laid down on us by management. You know, Hurricane Alice got dropped from Atlantic, so my manager said we need to put Jackie and Ian in the band, and it nearly broke the band up because there was a lot of buddy system going on with the original lineup. But me being kind of naive and thinking I had to do the corporate move, I'll just follow what they say. And I learned a hard lesson. You know, I divided the band badly. The guitar player, Kurt Mitchell, he just said no way. But I said, hey, we're almost there. We got to deal with Warner Brothers. We're hanging out at Stevie's. We're going to go open up for Whitesnake. We're going to do all this stuff. Let's play the game. Kurt's not a game playing guy. He's a sincere artist. He's like, it ain't about that for me, man. Danny's my brother. Buy me a drink. You know, convince me I got to do this kind of thing. So, you know, you got to sacrifice and make a lot of dumb choices if you want to play that game.
I think the time frame is, you know, there were so many bands that looked like one another that were trying to climb over each other's back. And I thought Hurricane Alice, they were a great band. A lot of those, I gravitated towards Bangalore Choirs, the Hurricane Alice's, the Heaven's Edge, you know, Lillian Axe, Leatherwolf. Those are the bands that I gravitated to because they didn't get the publicity that the Motley Crues did, the Poisons did.
You know, rock and roll is notorious for killing itself and forcing a cycle. And when the Beatles came, people pretty much had it with Elvis. And here comes these guys with funny hair and these great 2-minute songs. And his 10 years of fame had kind of dissipated. They came in and changed the game, and so did the Stones. And then the problem with Hollywood was that David Lee Roth kind of started that bleach blonde frontman outrageous thing. Well, Jim Dandy from Black Oak, he stole every lick Jim ever did, but they had this incredible guitar player. So every singer wanted to dye his hair blonde, wanted to work out, do the kicks, write the songs about ooh la la, baby, baby, whoa, whoa, and then you had Bon Jovi. So what happened was, I think, we cut the head off the snake, the generational tide, because Bangalore came out right when grunge hit. We had, the army of, management. We had Howard Kaufman, who handled the Eagles, and, Jimmy Buffett and Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood and Hart, Whitesnake. We had all that, but we were just another one of those bands that was really good, a little edgier than a lot of the ones you mentioned. But, in 91, all of a sudden we started seeing guys dressed in flannel shirts and combat boots with shorts on and greasy hair, and they'd laugh at us, calling us dirt heads, posers. And I didn't know what was going on. It was kind of like the 60s came back, the way they looked. The dirtier and grungier, the better. And then this little band out of Seattle called Nirvana, we shipped out the same day as them. I think we did 350,000 units and that week, and they did 600,000. Wow. The following week, we did like 100,000 copies, and they did 6 million. So the tide had changed. So we basically, and I don't really blame it, because you oversaturate a market with the same thing over and over. I mean, how many times can you buy a McDonald's Big Mac? It doesn't taste any different. It's just in a different box.
Still a Big Mac in a different box, different packaging.
Right.
So the Bangalore Choir, did they go on a big tour for the record?
Well, we did mid-level tours, Lynch Mob. Were managed by Howard, and we went out with them. We did some stuff with, of course, Cinderella and bands like that, but regional stuff, you do like Mexico up into Seattle, and then you do Texas, South New Mexico, stuff like that. But it was over. Literally, we had the most added radio song, 144 stations for Loaded Gun. Mm-hmm. And I remember being called in the office, and the radio guy going, "You got a hit, kid. You're on your way." And about a month later, being called in the same office saying, "We're dropping the band. It's over. Get a day job." Dramatic. It was like rock and roll's dead. And I remember hanging out at a house party with Janie Lane and Stephen Pearcy and all those guys. We were just standing in the kitchen doing shots of tequila going, what's happened? We're done. We couldn't get arrested. It was insane. Bands were coming out of Seattle, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, all these bands were just, I remember Pantera when they were a pop glam band in Texas.
Yes.
Exactly. I think we played some gigs together, and they had a different singer, and it was like, then they came out with this brutal kind of new metal thing too that was starting to come back, and I was like floored. I said, "Oh God, what is this?" I saw them open for Priest, and they just destroyed Judas Priest on the Ram It Down tour. So I knew they were on their way. It was over as fast as it had happened. I got a deal for Bangalore, and in California, like I said, you don't play every night. You play about once a month. I never paid to play like a lot of the guys did, selling tickets for the Roxy or the whiskey and all that. And I remember after about the 9th show, which took about a year, I was invited because living in Germany when I was in Accept, I'd known all the Scorpions, and the drummer had called me and said, "Hey, we're in LA. Michael Schenker's playing at the Palace. Meet me backstage, come on up and hang out with the guys." And I told my band, "Hey, let's go hang out with the Scorpions." And of course, for them, it was like, "Oh my God, the Scorpions." So we go on our way in the Palace to see Schenker play. There's Rudolph and Herman and Matt Matthias and all the guys. And A&R guy for Warner Brothers walked up to me, Giant Records, and said, "Hey, I'm hearing you guys are about to ink a deal, and it's looking really good." I said, "Yeah, if you don't make an offer, you're going to miss out, Kevin." And he said, "Be in my office in the morning." And I signed a huge deal the next day after about a year. Takes about 6 months for all the production and all that, but by that rolled around, then you had Desert Storm, all this shit. I'm watching CNN and the war happening, and then the music thing started changing. And probably 6 weeks to 2 months after the release, we were done.
I talked to one guy, and he's like, "Yeah, our manager said I got good news for you, and I got bad news for you. The good news is your video is going to be put on MTV. The bad news is the record label just dropped and the record
Yeah.
had just came out. And it's a shame because as good as the 80s were in music, there were still bands from 90, 91, 92, 93 that were still playing the 80s style, but no, they never got any kind of recognition at all. Like Bangalore Choir, there was a band out of Canada called Saints and Sinners.
I know who they are.
That music was just incredible, but unfortunately, like you just said, the quarter you put in the slot, the ride was over. There wasn't a whole lot more you could do.
It was a depressing, it was a maniacal. I mean, you're about to break and you got a hit on MTV and you got a number one on the radio and you're just sitting in the office with your mouth hanging open going, what do you mean we're dropped? We're going to take the loss. We got 1.8 million in the band. We can write it off. Good luck. But what I didn't know was that Bangalore had exploded in the UK and in Europe because grunge really didn't move over here until like a year or two later. Right. And I kind of always knew that grunge was a fad. It'd be a 4, maybe 5-year lifespan. And there's a couple bands that have come out of that I still greatly admire. I'm a big Chris Cornell fan. I thought Alice in Chains had something. Of course, Pantera, they weren't grunge, but they were unbelievable. But I knew it was kind of a fad thing, and that rock would kind of survive it. But the way rock survived it was kind of weird. It was homogenized. And then you got into all this internet bullshit, in the early 2000s that kind of changed the color of everything.
Well, do you, I feel personally, if it hadn't been for MTV and the Headbangers Ball, a lot of these bands, you didn't know what they looked like. You had a Metal Edge magazine, you had a Rip magazine, you had pictures of people, but to actually see them on television, I think if it hadn't have been for the exposure on, because Headbangers Ball is the first time I ever saw Bangalore Choir.
Yeah, I mean, you had that thing with Ricky Rackman called the Hard 60 and the Hard 30. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and Ricky had his nose up Axl's ass from Guns N' Roses. He's even in November Rain. He's in the wedding scene. I mean, right. I remember we went down to do an MTV party in Mexico, and we were all on the train, all the bands from our era. And Ricky was in the back of the train with Guns N' Roses, and the TV crew walked me back there, and we had made it to the Hard 30, which is pretty good because in 30 minutes you play like 5 bands if you're lucky, 4 bands. And I remember knocking on the door, and they'd say, David Reece from Bangalore is here, and he looked right at the cameraman. I'm not a fan. And I was like, what? I mean, it was like all corporate, and that was pretty hard to swallow. I mean, it is what it is. I don't see Ricky tagging along with Axl anymore these days, you know what I mean? But
yeah, they're not, I don't see them being buddies. Yeah.
They use each other as much as they could. But, you had bands that had that huge visual exposure, I don't know who wrote it. It was called Video Killed the Radio Star. That was a 70s song. And I think about that now. I think it actually hurt people more than it helped. I mean, it was part of the corporate scheme. You do a $1 million recording on a record and release, then you do a $150,000 video. You're already in debt $3-4 million. So you got to sell 2 or 3 million records just to pay off the loan.
To get it back, right.
But the more exposure, the better. And then you got to get that tour. And even though you've got a hit single, you're dogging it. You're in a van. You're opening. You're setting up your own gear, and you're opening for a band that sold 5 million records for 30 minutes, and hoping to cross over and go, oh, the people go wrap their arms around you too. But it's a hard nut to crack, even to this day.
How did you get connected with the Generation Clash album? I think that's one of my favorite albums. I love that song.
It's just a crazy ride, man. I mean, I had gone after Dare Force disbanded. I had gone back to LA before Accept again, and I was homeless again. And I'd met this woman named Lucy Forbes, and she had this little rock placement agency called Rock Congress. Her vision was, get all these musicians together and find bands for them. Well, she was kind enough to give me a hardwood floor with my bag of clothes and sleep next to a propane fake fireplace down on the beach to keep from freezing to death at night. And I had recorded some tracks with Mitch Perry, the guitarist from Talus.
Yes.
And we shopped it to everybody, and we were refused. And I had gotten just fed up with the music business. I just said, that's it. It's not going to happen. I don't know who I'm kidding. I'm going. My parents had moved to Colorado during that time, and I said, I got to come home. So I jumped in a Greyhound, but I had left that 5-song demo at Lucy's, just forgot it. And Dieter Dirks, the producer of the Scorpions, was kind of seeing her when he was in America. And he came in and said, "Hey, I got a problem, except they're changing the singers. And the guy we kind of looking at now, it ain't working out. Do you know anybody?" And she goes, "I know this guy," and gave him the cassette. And he played it and said, "That's the guy. Where is he?" And she goes, "I don't know. He just left a few days ago. He went to Colorado." Well, as fate would have it, I've been there maybe a month, and the phone rang at a little house in the mountains. I was painting houses again and construction, and the phone rang, and it was Wolf Hoffman saying that he had the demo and he really liked my voice and would I be interested in an audition. And I'm like, "How did you get that?" And he goes, "Dieter got it from Lucy." And it's a strange story. The stars line up and the phone rings, and a couple weeks later, I'm on a plane to Germany and auditioning for months before they actually said, "You're the guy," because they wanted to be sure. Udo and I are really great friends. We've done tours together, but they were making a big change, and the record failed. It was too much for the old fans and not enough for the new fans. So, but it kicked a lot of doors open for me. And then I went back to LA after I was fired from Accept, and that's how I got Bangalore together, because I had momentum.
I admire you for you were homeless, you were hungry, you slept on a floor. People welcomed you in their house. That's, in my opinion, that's a lot of hard work and dedication. And a lot of the guys down in LA, that's what I just read stories, and you know what, that's a passion and a love you got to have in your heart to want to sleep in your car or not have anything to eat just to be able to play music. My life is, I don't have my life. The problems in my life are nothing compared to somebody that's wanting to make it big and be an artist and go through the things you and others went through to hear yourself on a record or hear yourself on the radio. I think that's something to be admired.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think every human being, the trials and tribulations of life are dealt with in their own way. I mean, it's if it was easy, everybody'd be famous, and that's something you don't realize. There's a thing called the it factor. There are a lot of guys out there who I think can't sing a note that are making millions of dollars and are super famous, but they have something that's hard to explain, the it factor. There's something about that individual that the masses are drawn to. And not everybody has it. I mean, I may have a third of it. The passion for music, maybe it's a self-inflicted wound. I mean, nobody told me I had to go run around pulling car levers so the alarm didn't go off and sneaking in a back seat and then getting up for daylight before the guy went to work and being chased down the street by some maniac. Who are you in my car? I mean, there's a million of us down there doing that. Actors, dancers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of rock and roll bands take the easy way. They sell drugs, they move in with strippers because there's a constant cash flow.
Right.
And they're not that committed to the real work. They got it easy. They can sleep till 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, get all the free blow they want, naked girls, and they think they're rock stars. It ain't like that at all, man. It's a business. Yeah. First and foremost, it's business.
Well, tell me, you mentioned when we first got on that you're doing some recording. Tell me what you're working on now.
Well, yeah, I just released my last solo album in March this year, Baptized by Fire, another solo album. Then a couple years ago, I hooked up with Herman Frank from Iron Allies, or from Accept, and we have a group called Iron Allies. And we're doing festivals right now. We're doing a huge one on the 22nd called Grasspop in Belgium. We just played Czech Republic, a really big one, Czech Metal Fest last weekend. We're offered 2025, a bunch of huge festivals for that. But my solo band is doing as well the same thing. I live in a small village in Italy, and conveniently, my band all live in the same town. And I needed a demo place because when COVID hit, it literally started about 30 minutes from where I live. I don't know if you read that in the news, this virus took over Italy. And I was recording at that studio in that town where it actually broke out, and was heading over there the next day. And the guy called me and said, "Don't come. They've shut down the city." And we thought it was a terrorist attack. So that left me going, okay, for like 9 months, I couldn't even leave my yard. So I had stockpiled a bunch of material, and my wife works for the government. And she said, "Well, there's a studio right in town here." I'll translate the name, what it is. It means the sound guard. Garden, actually, is the name of the studio. But a guy named Riccardo Di Morosi, who I co-wrote my last solo album with, he produces me. He brought in the drummer, who is actually now playing in Iron Allies with Herman Frank and I, because our other drummer had to leave because of family problems. And his brother, the drummer's brother, Nicolo, is the guitarist. So it all just kind of fell into place. Like I said, I'm at rehearsal 3-4 days a week. It's the work ethic, man. I mean, that's one thing that Accept taught me. It's not a game. I mean, we would do 8, 10, 12-hour day rehearsals before tours. That's what Accept told me. And when you play in cover bands, like I told you about doing the grind, you learn the song, at home the night before or on the radio, write down the lyrics, and you play it the next day in a club, in a honky-tonk somewhere, and then you play it enough times where you can do it backwards. But we're refining, my songwriting craft. I'm with guys that,
Yes.
about playing well, being healthy. I don't drink. I quit drinking 6 years ago. That was becoming a real burdensome, tale to be carrying around. I was a total drunk,
Right.
and I don't know if it's because of the lifestyle I've led or just the stress of this life or or I just plain out like drinking beer too. It got me and I quit, and it was the best thing I ever did. And I'm singing better than I have in a long time. I've got a great new management company out of Paris and booking agency and for my solo stuff. And then we have another agency for Iron Allies. I just work, man. I'm not making what you'd call a comfortable living at music. But I'm still doing what I love to do, and I guess that's the curse of the rock and roll bug. I mean, you can't. I walked away from this shit for 9 years, Jeremy.
Yes,
I
sir.
went to Montana and cowboyed on a ranch. I ran a big outfit in Montana. I love to hunt and fish, right? So I'd go up there and bird hunt and deer hunt. And I met these ranchers, and I told them, I said, your house needs fixing and painting. And they said, everybody says that. I said, go buy this, and I fixed it for them. And they said, we could use a hand like you on this outfit. Can you ride? And I said, a little, because when I was a kid, I rode.
Right.
But I like to go back to cowboying, and I loved it. But deep inside,
You
in my
still had
pickup,
you still had the bug.
yeah, I was singing those songs. And then I never had a computer. In about 2004, I got one. I traded a puppy to a guy who was an IT guy. And he got me a MySpace page and all that shit. And I turned it on. And I mean, literally that day I had 3 band offers. People thought I was dead. And I ended up in Sweden after being in Montana for a couple of years. And you have to go tell your cowboy boss that you used to be a rock and roll star. They think you're on drugs. They go, what? So they Google my name and go to Wikipedia, and they say, why didn't you tell us that? Well, it's not something you want to tell a bunch of guys sitting around spitting and drinking beer after punching cows all day, because you just kind of want to let that life go. But part of me wanted to be back in the game. But I didn't know about illegal downloading. I didn't know about internet. I didn't know anything about it, how much the game had changed again. It was almost worse than the grunge movement. You make a record and 2 days later, there's 1,000 sites that are giving your record away for free. And, you have to work with what the environment is. The other day I read that thing the guy from Spotify said. He goes, to little no cost, I can function my platform and, sell music that he had nothing to do with. And a lot of artists that I know on Facebook are like, yeah, well, best of my recollection, it still costs the same to pay it by the hour for a studio. Gasoline is a lot more expensive to travel. Plane tickets are more than they ever were. And you got to pay your players. Nobody's going to do this for nothing, especially talented people that are, skilled at what they do. So that hasn't changed for us. But the mantra of the business is completely flipped on its head. The only way to really make a living is make a record, go out and hope to sell merchandise and tour your ass off. And then again, you run into now, COVID really caused a bottleneck, all the cancellation. So immediately after they opened everything up, all those bands that had rescheduled started touring. I mean, there were bands playing my town, 3 bands in one night just to fill out their contractual obligations. So to try to book tours, it took about a year, maybe a little more, to start scheduling open dates. So I'm fortunate that I can do that, but it's still a battle. I mean, I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm married. I have a great family. Life is good. And it's just about music. I haven't written the song yet that I want to write. I mean, it's still there somewhere.
You're right.
But it's a day out process, dude. It's like anything.
Sure.
If you have faith or whatever you practice, if you don't practice it 100%, you're not going to find it.
I have got in touch with so many people that I have, followed for 40 years. I think Instagram and Facebook are a great platform for people that like yourself that are still performing, that still want to get their name out there. And I've posted Bangalore Choir on my Instagram page and tagged as much as I can. Tomorrow I'm actually posting Generation Clash on my Instagram and tagging. And I just think a lot of people, it's easier for somebody to find a person or find a band now instead of having to get on the internet and Google David Reece. You got 5,000 articles, but yet there's David Reece right here. Instant message them and they may be kind enough to answer you back, or they may say, "Hey man, thank you for posting that video. I hadn't seen it in years." Or, I'm glad people like yourself are still making music, doing what they love to do. That I think I admire that greatly.
Thank you. Well, without guys like you, there ain't guys like me though either. There's two kinds of musicians, Jeremy. The player, I firmly believe that. Without the network of people like you that are doing podcasts and, promoting what they love and enjoy, it's the same passion. I mean, mine's just on a business level and a different mantra than yours is. And yeah, it helps, but also there's restrictions with the algorithms on the internet. You can't share so much of this. You can't do that. I mean, it's almost futile. So I have a huge network of people that are doing what you do for me, because without it alone, they wouldn't allow me to do it.
That's true.
And I'm constantly on the emails. I'm constantly on the phone. I'm constantly booking flights. I pretty much do a lot of management work myself and then say, finish this to my manager. But you still have to do self-contained, production. I mean, that's why you need to surround your life with good people.
I totally agree.
You can't, it's like a good dog. I mean, you know what I mean? I've had probably 150 great bird dogs in my life, but probably out of that 150, 5 super dogs. You know what I mean? And I've sold them to keep this business alive and keep moving forward. Broke my heart. But if I'm going to go here, I need the money for this, and nobody's going to give it to me, and it's not about the money. Sure, money's nice. Money's great, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't like it. But there's a lot more to it than being visual and being seen and all that stuff. It's funny because like we played Czech Metal Fest a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago. It was pissing like a heifer on a flat rock, raining like hell, and there was about 10,000 people there. And we went on at 1:00 in the afternoon, and I'm like dreading it. I'm in the production office going, ain't going to be nobody there. I walked out in the back line and looked out at the crowd. It was full of people with hefty bags over their head. And my drummer said to me, grab the wireless mic and go to the people. They're standing out there waiting for us. And I did. Put on my cowboy hat, ran right out to the guardrail and reached out and were grabbing their hands. They absolutely went crazy. One of the best days of my life. That's probably why I do it. But
fans love stuff like that. They love the interaction. Because I'd say it's like if I was somewhere and I could get close enough to you. I'm not a stalker. I'm not a weird guy. I'm just a fan that has loved what you've done for so long. And if I could just walk up to you and say, "Hey, Mr. Reece, thank you for all the music you played. I'm such and such that has talked to you before. It is, it's a pleasure to meet you." That means a lot and you see musicians nowadays, they do it more that they want to get to the fans, because like we go to M3 every year, and I see a lot of bands at M3 that I've never seen in my life. But you know what? Those 4,000 people that paid $600 for 2 tickets to come see you play, if it wasn't for them being there, you wouldn't be out there still being able to play the music
And if an artist doesn't realize that, he needs to pack it up and go home. Because I can tell you,
agree.
These festivals in Europe, I mean, they're not cheap. You get 20 bands a day of all the headliners, but a couple who have kids now, maybe grandkids, because our market, let's be honest, is 40 to 70 something years old. I can't stand on a concrete floor for 3 bands. I don't know about you, but it hurts.
I have to sit down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's me too, and I'm an active man at my age. I'm 64 in August this year, and I can't do it anymore. I love it, but I have to find a place to sit, and I can't. You know, these people who work 5, 6, 7 days a week and plan their vacation for M3.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
their heart and husband and wife. We're going, baby, and we'll put together $20 a week, and then we're gonna go.
That's what we do. We set money aside because we know
There you go.
with a hotel and being there for 2 days, it's going to be X amount of money. So 2 months ago, so now we're already starting to save
There you
for
go.
next year.
Here it's for a weekend, even in the city they live in, it's $1,000. I mean, a
Exactly.
hotel and or the train or the ticket prices because of all the bands, the economy. I mean, driving. You don't want to drive if you've been drinking, so it's just everything. So if a person's willing to sacrifice all that to come up and shake my hand and say thanks for that record, or one of the things that I really like in my life is when I meet fans and they say, that song, blah, blah, blah. I was going through this in my life and that song saved my life. And you look at them like, what? And you go, really? They go, oh, yeah. I'm about ready to put a bullet in my head, or my wife had left me, or I had cancer, or my child died. It's heartbreaking, man. I mean, and you look at him and you go, you had no idea that one human being, that much love for that, and just wanted to shake my hand and tell me that story. And I'll sit down with him, give him a laminate, give him some merch, and just tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What do you do? And then they look at me like, well, you're not an asshole. I'm like, no, I know a lot of them, but
yeah. Well, that's kind of the purpose. That's kind of the purpose of this doing this podcast. I haven't done many of them, and I try to do a good job. I get tickled, and it means a lot to me. Your face pops up there on the screen. I'm like, wow, I'm talking to David Reece. I would have never in a million years thought that, but I think it's great. What you're doing. You're still out there playing. And you said something a minute ago that my papa said. He always said it's raining like a cow peeing on a flat rock. That's how he always said it. I say that now. People are like, what does that mean? Well, you've never seen a cow pee on a flat rock. It goes everywhere.
It goes everywhere.
Well, Mr. Reece, I've probably taken up enough of your time. I know you're a busy man, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Bless you, Jeremy. I thank you. And you know what? When you get this thing out, share it on my page. I'll share it to all my crazy friends, and I'll help you as much as I can. And maybe one day we'll cross paths. Whereabouts are you in North Carolina?
I live in near Raleigh, right in the center of North Carolina. So
I played a couple of gigs for the 82nd and all that, and I've been through that neck of the woods quite a few times. I'm trying to do a U.S. schedule right now, and if I can, I'll advertise it, and you come up and say howdy. We'll shake hands and sit down and have a Coke together.
I'll most definitely do it. And sir, I really appreciate you.
Me too.
And
God bless you, friend. Thank you very much. And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. And you have a good day. God bless you too. Bye,
sir. Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Hair Metal Rules podcast. A big thank you to David Reece for taking time out of his busy schedule to talk with us. David has one of those unique voices. When you hear it, you know exactly who it is. I admire singers from the Sunset Strip era. There were so many bands out there trying to make it, to get a record deal. These guys slept in cars, on floors and couches, and went days without eating. But they had a drive and passion for the music and the scene not to give up. Unfortunately, many of them never made it into the big leagues. From the ashes of Hurricane Alice came the band Bangalore Choir. If you haven't heard them, look them up. They sound great. Before we end the show, I would like to play a few songs from their debut album. This is Angel in Black and Loaded Gun.
Another victim racist. I'm just a number on her list. She fights so good, she always wins. A snake in the garden, she's taking away. Well, I'm a little lies. They won't have your angel in red. She took me down to hell and back. She's cold and ready to
Listeners, I appreciate your support and hope the things we discuss on the show bring back some great memories for you. Please rate the podcast and give me feedback on whatever platform you listen from. I would appreciate it. Until next time, keep rocking and stay tuned for more shows filled with exciting guests and talks about your favorite hair metal bands. Till next time, folks, so long and God bless you all.